Good morning, all. Thanks for joining this morning's Economy, Residents and Community Committee. It's Monday, the 28th of October. As well as the usual business on the agenda, we've got two substantial papers to go through today. Firstly, the Powys results of the STAR survey. That's a national survey looking at the satisfaction levels of our tenants in relation to their housing needs and the services around that they're provided. The second one is around the local authorities sort of route map, the journey and the strategy in an early stages draft of how we're attempting to reach net zero. We'll work through the agenda items, and the first one is apologies. Rachel, have we received any apologies for this morning?
Apologies received from Councillor Angela Davis and Councillor Brian Davis.
Thank you. And just to ask all of the members of the committee around disclosures of interest, to receive any disclosures of interest by members relating to items to be considered at this meeting. Are there any disclosures of interest that anyone would like to make? Okay, I'm not seeing any, and I'll take silence as a no. Third item on the agenda is declaration of party whips. To receive disclosures of prohibited party whips which a member has been given in relation to the meeting in accordance with section 78(3) of the Local Government Measure 2011. Members are reminded that under section 78, members being given a prohibited party whip cannot vote on a matter before the committee. Would anyone like to declare any declarations of party whips? Okay, again, I'm going to take silence as a no, and I'm not seeing any thumbs up. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting. This was held on Monday, the 9th of September. So a relatively detailed meeting in terms of its content. And the first substantial item was the Freedom Leisure Annual Report. The committee made a number of observations and recommendations back towards the Cabinet and stuff, and they've been fully answered in the response. Is there any member here that would like to pull out any elements of the minutes around the Freedom Leisure Annual Report? Okay. Second one was the Home to School draft transport policy. The committee again debated and had conversation and presentations around this one and made a number of recommendations and observations, almost all of which have been answered where there was a direct question and noted where it was more of a comment. Subsequently, since then, the Home to School transport paper has been through a joint scrutiny committee, and findings from that and observations have been put back to Cabinet as well. But are there any questions or comments or concerns on the Home to School transport policy section of the minutes? Okay, I'm going to move on. Car park review of section 7 in the minutes. Again, we looked at the results of the quite extensive car park review that was carried out across the authority over a number of months, and the committee made observations and recommendations and some comments that fed their way back, and those have been answered where there was a direct question and noted where there were comments. Does anyone have any questions, comments or observations on the car park review element of the minutes? Okay. Okay, I don't think there's anything else on the minutes that we need to go through. The work programme was there, so concludes item 4, unless anyone has any questions or comments they want to raise about the minutes in general from the previous meeting. Okay. So the first substantial paper of the morning is the STAR survey, and as in the introduction, this is a resident survey, those that are in our tenanted housing accommodated sort of through the housing service, but also looking at some of the ancillary services that they might need and be provided through that. We've got Councillor Matthew Dorrance, lead for housing within the authority, with us, and I believe we've got Matt will help present this paper, and we're possibly going to have Andy from the housing lead as well. But Councillor Matthew, I don't know if you wanted to give a quick introduction before we hand over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for requesting to look at this as a scrutiny committee. It is quite an old report now. It is looking back on previous performance. The council is required to undertake a tenant satisfaction survey every 2 years, and this is our latest one, which reported at the end of 2023. So we have already received this report as an organisation and are working to implement changes where we've fallen short. But overall, satisfaction scores have increased significantly across the board over the last 2 years for the council, which is positive for the people who live in the homes that we provide. And overall satisfaction is on par with other local authorities in Wales. I think it's really interesting that the value for money, value for rent is particularly strong in Paris, and it is unusual for this to be a top key driver in these sort of reports. And we have made steady progress across all of the measures. I think it's really interesting to see the progress we've made in terms of repairs and maintenance. Some members of this committee may be aware that repairs and maintenance used to be an external provision for the council through Heart of Wales Property Services. We've undertaken significant work over the past 2 to 2.5 years to bring that back in-house, and that is steadily improving. And that's positive news for me as a portfolio holder to see, because it shows the changes that we are making were the right ones for the people who live in our homes. But there is always more to do, Chair, and we are always prepared to learn and improve as a housing provider. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Matthew. And obviously the papers came through to us a week or so, and some of us won't have seen it when it first came out, but I think the general feedback was some pretty good results in there. A few areas perhaps of concern that will be raised through now during the discussion, but the general sense of it and the general trend was a positive upward trend, and yeah, making note of that substantial shift away from a sort of a subcontracted service effectively back to an in-house service. And I know many members of the committee here helped reevaluate that process as well. So there's a good lot of learning come through from that. And I can see Andy's with us as well. So I will, Andy, ask you to come in and give a short presentation on the overview of the results. Matt, you can step back a bit if that's okay, and we'll let Andy take the lead on this one. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I had a bit of a problem getting Zoom to work, I'm afraid. Just to give some sort of background to this, 700 out of 5,100 tenants were interviewed. We have a 95% confidence level on that, that the results are accurate and reliable. So that is quite a good response, really, I think. What have you. Overall satisfaction is 10% higher than 2019, 4% higher than 2021. We're on a par with all local authorities in Wales now, which is really good. So we've moved on. As we've noted earlier in comments made by Councillor Dorrance, key drivers: rent value for money, repairs and maintenance overall, and listening to views and acting upon them. On terms of value for money, at 84%, that's 14% higher than 2019 and 6% higher than 2021, and we're above social landlords. And that also above social landlords applies to service charges. Repairs and maintenance, still a lot of work to do. 66% is not as high as I would like to be. Recent repair satisfaction is running at 80%, so hopefully next year's STAR survey will start to reflect that. But I would like to say we're 12% higher than 2019 and 3% higher than 2021. So all in all, the progress is going, in the right direction. Contact and communication, again, there's work to do there. 62% is not good enough, but we're higher. It is going up, 15% higher than 2019. 7% higher than 2021, and we are above the norm for local authorities. Our staff are deemed friendly and approachable by 82%, but we do need to get people more involved in having a say in how services are managed. Quality of properties, we're on a par with local authorities. Our stock is quite old, as you know, because we were stocked from building council houses between 1992 and 2012. So we do have the issue of aging homes, but the quality at 77% means we're now in the upper quartile, and it is slowly going up. We're 4% higher than 2021. I think there's a good thing here around a place to live, because neighbourhood reflects the wider approach, not just what housing does, but what the council as a whole does. and we're above social landlords across Wales, and 86% of people do like their neighbourhood in Powys, which is pretty good. In terms of antisocial behaviour, which has increased, as we all know, since the COVID situation, right across the piece, there seems to be a general change in the way people behave. 22% are dissatisfied, 67% are satisfied. We're above social landlords, but clearly we need to do a lot more work with other people, other organisations, on how we tackle antisocial behaviour, because it's not always within our power as a landlord. You know, criminal activity is not something we can take action against, but especially if it's by people renting privately properties or living in owner-occupied properties. So we are trying to build up those links and work with other people to get that right. So there's still work to do. What we're doing at the moment, we're tidying up the way, or improving the way we catch information on repairs and maintenance. We have our Tell Us project. Basically, resident engagement officers go out and spend time on an estate in a neighbourhood, knock on doors and talk to people. We've introduced QR codes and things there so that when people are at work, they can get back to us afterwards. That is published every month in our staff newsletter, so that they can see where people are liking what we're doing and what we're not doing. And that way we can start to sort of, it's kind of like you own these results, you share these results, we all want them to go up. And I think we're starting to see a good result. We do keeping in touch visits as well. What we're aiming to do, because Paris is such a big area, is going to take longer than it would say in a place like Birmingham. We want to visit all our tenants at least once every 3 years. We've started to do that. I have to be, you know, people are welcoming the visits, but what we are finding is demand for other services. People who haven't been in touch with the council, we visit and we may find that they need some help, which social services can provide or children's services can provide. And I know that's driving demand for other services in times when we're straitened for resources, but I think it's the right thing to do, to find out stuff, and hopefully we can stop things going on. We conduct a new tenant survey. Again, that's published every 3 months, not monthly, of all our new tenants, how they found the allocations process, basically how they experienced registering with Homes and Powers and being allocated a home, and also the quality of their home when they moved in. And that too is showing quite positive results. And we've just started this year. We used to do surveys on major works like kitchens and bathrooms, and we used to do them just as they were finished. And what we're now going to do is do it after a year, because as we all know, when you buy something new, it's all exciting on the first day. It's after you've experienced it for a year, when you realise you can't make the television change channel or the car seats are uncomfortable, that you need to find out. And we want to find out more about what people think about, particularly bathrooms. Kitchens. They're really important. This isn't to do with our tenants, but it is tenants of the future, some of them. We are, over the next 2 months, conducting a survey of how people experience our homelessness services. Now, I know there's always been a bit of cynicism there. People will always say they've had a wonderful time when you give them a home, but don't until then. Actually, what we need to do is find out, how did you experience the process, the way when you contacted us, how we spoke with you, how we dealt with you, how we tried to help you. We can't give everybody a home. I really do wish we could. We haven't got enough at the moment. But that's going to be a really interesting piece of work, because homelessness is pretty grim for anybody, and we need to do the best we can. We can't make it not grim, but at least we can try and, you know, lessen the pain. I think it's really important that we do that. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but I think bringing repairs and maintenance in-house has worked. I think localizing the teams, as you know, we're kind of ahead of the game with the sustainable Powys thing of sort of 4 or 5 major bases. Housing's been doing that for ages. We have 4 area teams, 2 of which are kind of split. The Welsh Pool team also covers Machynlleth, and the Brecon and Ustra team cover Brecon and Ustra Gunnies. So we are very much into that kind of localism approach, because every area is different, and we want people to get to know us and us to get to know the people who live in an area and the properties as well. We inherited properties from 3 different local authorities, all of whom had 3 very different approaches to design and build. So it's kind of quite interesting that. So yeah, I'm not going to say all is rosy in the garden. I think it is blooming, but I think we're going in the right direction. Sorry, Chair. I hope I've not rambled too much.
No, thank you, Andy. There's clearly a lot of information in this detailed survey anyway, so I think that really warranted pulling out the highlights from it. What we'll do now is we'll ask any of the committee if they would like to ask some specific questions around areas of it, and maybe have to answer some of them here and now between you. And if not, perhaps you can follow them up as through the minutes process. Councillor Graham Breeze, you're first on mine.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do wish to raise some serious concerns that this report reveals about my own town of Welshpool. And while I absolutely commend the officers for a very thorough report, which overall I think is very positive and encouraging, I am really concerned about the level of satisfaction from our Welshpool tenants, which does surprise me a little. Just to pick out a couple of points under the homes section, point 4.2 in the pack is showing that a significantly worse than average level of satisfaction about the safety of our homes in Welshpool. Point 5.2 shows that the value for money view is again significantly lower than elsewhere. Point 6.2, the opinions on repairs and maintenance, again significantly below the county average. And finally, on neighbourhood services, again, satisfaction levels with ASB handling far worse than any other area in Powys. I have to say this does reflect the views I receive from my residents and makes a disappointing read, though it clearly doesn't reflect what's happening across the rest of Powys, as this report reveals. So personally, I recognise a significant improvement since maintenance was taken back in-house, as has been previously mentioned, but that's not reflected here in the comments from Welshpool tenants. So can I have some assurances that from the portfolio holder perhaps, or the officers, that this particular problem in Welshpool has been fully recognised, and an explanation perhaps now of why we have this situation, and indeed what action is planned to improve customer satisfaction in levels in Welshpool? Or indeed, as perhaps Councillor Matthew mentioned, this is a significantly old report, so indeed, has anything happened already to improve the situation? Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Councillor Graham. I'll allow Matthew to come in first, and then Andy, I'm sure, will follow up as well. Thank you.
Thanks,
Councillor Matthew.
and thanks, Councillor Breeze. This is a really important point, and you're right to raise it. There is an anomaly around the responses from the area you represent, Welshpool, and that's clearly picked up in the report. We don't have any evidence within the service to show that the level of repairs and maintenance, the level of customer service, or the level of any service provided to tenants in the Welshpool area is any less than anywhere else within the county. But that said, there is a perception, I think, from people living in Welshpool that's picked up in the report that you've articulated. What that says to me is a couple of things. We've got work to do to give people confidence in terms of the level of service that we're provided. We've got work to do in terms of being visible and available within our communities to the people that we serve and represent. And that work has already started. So we've started locality meetings with local members. We've started check-in meetings with tenants and residents. We've started walkabouts on estates with locally elected members, because the housing service is a people service. It has to be visible and in the communities that we serve. We won't see the results of that until the next STAR survey, but we will anecdotally pick things up from our contact with our tenants and our service users. And the reports and the information that I get show that actually this is working and we are engaging with tenants. The issue around antisocial behaviour, I think, is a really interesting one, because overall it shows that there is high satisfaction for us as an organisation, the way that we deal with that, higher than some of our comparators in other bits of Wales. But there is a perception or a feeling that in Welshpool that's not working in the same way. Lots of that is around partnership working, and we are, interdependent on other organisations and agencies to be able to help us in dealing with those things. So it may be that we need to do some sort of spotlight review with Scrutiny to identify some of the broader issues in Welshpool. but we actively engage with tenants and residents. Indeed, we work with a tenant scrutiny panel, which is a group of councillors and people who live in our homes, as you well know, to be able to test and work out policy and solutions to problems in our communities. And I think all of that work is positive. There's definitely been something going on in terms of the locality. That's clearly picked up in the report, but I'm confident that we've got the systems and processes in place to be able to deal with it. And indeed, I think we are dealing with it.
Thank you, Councillor Matthew. I'll allow Andy to come in as well and pick up on any specifics as well before coming back to you, Councillor Graham, just to make sure that you're content with those answers. Andy, over to you.
I think Councillor Dorrance has answered everything. You know, there's not a lot I can say to add to that. We do tend to get more antisocial behaviour in Welshpool. Some of that is related to drugs and narcotics and stuff. We know it's part of an area where there's a degree of county lines and stuff like that going on. We have now opened, we now have an area base. As you know, when Naiad Mouldwing closed, we lost that. And we're now based at the Alford Family Centre on the Alford estate. Unfortunately, we don't have a front-facing situation there because of the safeguarding issues with the children, but staff are now based in the area, which I think will help to alleviate and address those issues from Councillor Breeze. But yes, we certainly, I'm aware of this, and we are doing our best. As Councillor Dorrance says, we tend to. This report came as a bit of a surprise because we tend to have quite an active team up in Welshpool, which covers quite a big area. So yeah, I will follow through further on this and make sure we're keeping up the pressure to improve services there. Welshpool is an important area because it's our area closest to the West Midlands and the other urban areas. So we do tend to get a bit of spillover from those places, I'm afraid to say.
Thank you both. Councillor Graham, are you content with the answers you've received here?
Yes, thank you very much for the positive responses. I can see that hopefully things are already in place to see an improvement. I have taken part in 3 estate walks myself in the last couple of weeks with officers, which I think is a really positive move, and we look forward to seeing some improvements.
Great, thank you. Councillor Corinna.
I was just going to ask a straightforward question. I mean, initially I was going to compliment Andy and Councillor Dorrance for this improvement, which the STAR report lays out. But I just wondered what contributed to the low point in 2019, other than taking repairs and maintenance in-house. Were there other preconditions?
Gosh, well, I joined the authority in 2018. So the survey in 2019 would have reflected that period before I joined the authority. I think there was a combination. I think the repairs and maintenance is a big issue. It's a major matter of concern for tenants. And yeah, I think that would have made a big contribution to that sort of lack of concern, and the fact that we've changed it. I also think the stress we've put on localism since then, of local teams, of no longer having housing management officers who try to do everything. We've now split it into housing options officers and housing officers. We've introduced sort of career grades, so we have people who can, like housing technicians and housing assistants, so that the other officers can do the more complex stuff as people learn their skills. So it's much more locally based. I've made a point of encouraging managers to get out and about, not sit in an ivory tower. COVID rather buggered that up, but it's a lot better now. I like to go out and sit with teams, and see what's going on. So I just think we become probably, I don't want to criticize, so I wasn't here, and it's not fair to criticize people who can't answer for themselves, but I do think HALPS was one of the big issues, and I do think the general centralization and trying to do things too generically. Housing is not, it's a lot of different skills. You think about it, the people side is the social services side. You've got homelessness, which is very intense. You've got neighborhood and estate management, which is like community development. You've got construction, which is both repairing and building homes. That is a massive, it's like a council all in itself. So what I try to do is recognize that those are distinct skill sets. Yes, all work together, but we all know you buy a spade to dig a hole and a fork to till the earth. You don't try and do it both with the same tool. So that's what I've tried to do, get that specialist things up. And I do think work with your people and get to know the tenants. We've got a much better relationship, I think, with our tenant scrutiny panel. You know, we now talk to them, for example, this year, well, in the next few weeks, we talk to them about rents for next year and that HRA business plan. I think that is filtering through. When I joined the authority, we didn't present the business plan to cabinet, but we now do. So I think, you know, those are important things. And so I don't want to, I feel a bit odd because I've only been here 6 years. Now, for all of you, it seems like way too long, but there we go.
No, thank you, Andy. Corinna, are you happy with that? Thank you very much. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Gary. Again, the overall report is very interesting. My issue is I just want to find out a little bit about the apprenticeships. How many new apprenticeships have we placed? And with I know that we've got in the care and maintenance back in house. What and how much supplies of new vans were created, and at what cost? That's the start of my questions, and I've got a few other questions after. So should we just start with that bit first, please?
I didn't catch the second part of your question, Councillor James. Sorry.
Right. So we've got how many apprentices have been taken on, and how many new vans have been supplied to those? Because we've got 4 area teams, and were there any vans supplied extra to those apprenticeships?
Okay. Apprentices, we have taken on, well, when I joined the authority, I took on 4 apprenticeships. We didn't have housing in-house repairs, but we took on apprentices in what was then tenancy services, and 4 of those have stayed with the council. So they were administrative people who have now moved on and moved on in the council. So they have stayed on, which is good. Advertisements are going out now for 3 trade apprentices. So we'll be taking those on. So if we wanted to get the service up to speed, one of the key things you need to have with apprentices is skilled workers to train them, you know. So we've made sure we've got the people in-house. We didn't inherit that many workers from Helps. So we've done that. We have also taken on another apprentice in our finance team, housing finance team, because again, you know, it's that's a skill in itself. So we've got apprentices there. So we will have by the end of this year 4 apprenticeships, and we are thinking about whether or not we can afford some more. Because it is abundantly clear to everybody that there is a shortage of trades. You know, we cannot get plumbers, electricians, or heating engineers. I just literally cannot recruit them. We've had to advert 3 times for heating engineers, and we didn't get anyone because we can make shed loads of money elsewhere. In terms of vehicles, we inherited no vehicles from Helps. The vehicles are in a shocking state, and they weren't vehicles we wanted to take on. So we have taken on a fleet. Generally, apprentices will work with another worker, a senior to them, fully qualified trade, and they will probably go out with that guy or girl, because we have ladies as well in our workforce, in their vehicle. So apprentices probably won't be given their own vehicle until they're heading towards the end of their training. But yeah, we did take on a fleet, but you know, we made provision for that in the costings. We also make provision to replace that fleet as and when it comes to its end of its natural life. You know, vehicles last a lot longer than they did when I was younger. But as I say, we inherited nothing of value from Helps, and their vehicles weren't theirs anyway. Kia used to lease the vehicles to Helps to make presumably more profit.
Okay. The second part of the question, how is the work and the apprenticeships being monitored, the work that is being carried out for a high standard? So I know you just said that you're putting an apprenticeship with a trade person, but who actually monitors that work after the work is carried out?
Okay, well, the apprentices are just being advertised in the trades now, so they haven't started. What would happen is they would be trained. The skilled person, the fully articled carpenter, whatever, who's working with them would train them and then watch them do their work. We have housing quality officers and senior housing quality officers who also monitor the works. We have voids coordinators, and we have what is called a quality assurance team in housing quality, and they undertake those surveys of people to find out if the repairs are done. We do thousands of repairs. We can't check every single one, but what I'm counting on is we all had to learn, and we all learned under the watchful eye of somebody. So it's their responsibility almost to make sure that the apprentices do a good job, or they won't do a perfect job, but it will be put right by the person next to them, because we all remember when we started. So I think that's important. The overall thing is, it's the quality of work, but I want us to be in a position that we have the workforce of tomorrow coming through. We've got we have one of the oldest workforces in the council. We have a very aging workforce, and if we go back to the days of compulsory competitive tendering, that's when apprenticeships ended. And now that that has gone, I'm hoping as a local authority we can start to once again develop our local people to work in service of their community, which is basically what an apprenticeship is, isn't it?
I think generally in trade, they're all fighting for apprenticeships
Yeah.
throughout. So there doesn't seem to be the young people coming through the system. They're looking for a different way of lines of work, I think. The other part of my question is missed appointments. I notice on 6.3, there's missed appointments. I know it's low, 5. Is that due to the missed appointments of the worker or the actual tenant not being available at that time?
Difficult to say, but we do, I'm afraid, sometimes people will be delayed on a job, so they can't get through, and if they're out in a remote place, their cell phone won't work. But sadly, we do get cases when the teams or the guy shows up on the door and somebody isn't in. Now, events happen. People may have to, rush to work, go to school, might even just forget, so it's low. Sometimes, yes, it is our fault because a job overruns or the traffic's bad or what have you, but sometimes it is people aren't there. So, but it is, low, which I think is good. I mean, we're trying to make that better, but, it's difficult to say. It could be all kinds of things. I guess,
What's the timescale of replacing that missed appointment?
we try and contact the tenant and agree with them the next time. It's not based on we'll do it in the next 3 days, because they might say, well, I'm in work for 7.
Yeah.
So we try and do it more subtly. When are you available? Oh, I've got a couple of days off in a couple of weeks. All right. Is that all right for you? Yeah, that's really how it should be, shouldn't it? We should fit around the tenants, not t'other way.
Yeah. Thank you very much for answering those questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both. Councillor Chloe.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm still a bit new to me, all this, but it's really great to see such a positive report, and the high figures for Dracowell are reflected in our experiences here as well, which is nice for us, although interesting to see it's not the same case across the whole of Powys. I had a recent visit out with housing officers on a estate we've got locally, and it was a really positive experience. Their engagement with tenants was great, and people were really responsive, and I thought the approach of the officers was really good too. 2 of the issues that come up here, which I just wondered whether there was any plans for, I suppose. One relates to the housing stock. You mentioned it's very old, and in our area they've had fire safety reports which have said that the stairways are too narrow for stair lifts now, so they're having to take a lot of stair lifts out, which obviously is impacting a lot of residents who are then either having to move, which is causing them some concern. Is this the case across a lot of houses, our housing stock, in that people are having to move because things aren't appropriate for their needs anymore? And do we have any plans to find alternatives that would enable them to have a similar situation in the local area, where they're sort of settled? And the second is that there seems a real shortage of housing in the council's sort of holdings. I know you mentioned that we were stopped from building any, but are there plans to add to the housing stock that we've got available to try and address that? Or is it quite a localized issue? I'm not so sure on that one. Thank you.
Okay, if I can, sorry, Councillor Dorrance, sorry.
Thanks. I'm happy to pick this one up, if that's okay, Chair. To start with the stock, Councillor Mansfield, yes, we've got ambitious plans to build new homes, more than 350 over the lifetime of our plan. We have particular issues in the south of the county with phosphates and restrictions on where we can build, but we are making progress, and we've had a very successful meeting this month with Welsh Government around some of those challenges and some work that we can do. So we are laser focused on increasing the net number of homes that we've got available for social rent by the council. Indeed, we've got an acquisitions programme as well to buy properties back into the stock. The issue that you talked about in relation to fire safety, we've had a number of these concerns raised with us. I am very clear that we have to implement the fire authority's advice, and we have to be compliant with that. There is no compromising on it. We are all very aware of the tragedy of the Grenville fire disaster. We cannot compromise on fire safety, and in fact, the service are working really hard to ensure that we are compliant. Where we've got those types of stair lifts in communal areas, so these aren't in people's individual properties behind their front doors, they are in the communal areas. The advice that the council has had around fire evacuation and the size of the stairwell for evacuation means that the stair lifts in some of our flats causes a problem and enables us to not comply with the regulations. So where we've got to remove those, we absolutely work with families and tenants to ensure that we can meet their housing needs, or that we have plans in place for them on an individual basis. I've held meetings with people, tenants in your ward around these issues, and we will absolutely remain committed to finding accommodation that meets people's needs in the communities where they want it. This is an ongoing piece of work, but the bottom line on this is, whilst it's really difficult and it causes people disruption, we accept that. We will work to find solutions, but we cannot compromise on fire safety.
Andy, did you want to come in at all, or are you happy with that answer on that particular point?
I think Councillor Dorrance has addressed that. We have a clear need, and we will be building as many homes as we can. We do have some land in Crickowell that we own, and as soon as the phosphates issue is resolved, we can get planning consent, we will be building homes on that land. There's a site we've held now since the phosphates issue. Just to give you a statistic, as a country, the UK builds 45% of the total number of houses it built in 1970. So it's just an interesting statistic, and that's all tenures. That's regardless of tenure. So, my house was once a green field, and I live in Ceredigion, as you know, which is largely a very big green field. But, we have got to build more homes, and we will, and there will be damn good homes, I can assure you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Chloe, you okay with those answers?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. I suppose I completely accept, and the tenants and everyone's very accepting of the fact that fire safety has to be allowed. So that's great to hear the commitment there from Councillor Dorrance. But on the housing thing, it's good to hear that it's not just about building new homes. There's also an acquisition plan as well, which I'd be really supportive of, because with the population size we've got, it would be great to have not all of our green fields being taken over by new homes.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rafe.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, congratulations, Andy, to you and your team for the significant progress that's been made, and I'm sure that's received the recognition that it deserves. My question relates to contractors and the use of contractors for repairs and maintenance, specifically to there's 3 comments by tenants in section 9. That refers to contractors changing regularly, which has led to delays in works being completed. I'd be grateful if you could confirm. So, with our R&M service now in-house, why is there still a need to use external contractors? And if there is a need to use them, what actions have been taken to address the concerns raised by the tenants in the report? Thank you.
Okay. When we took the service back in-house, we were quite surprised how few staff helps had and how much work they subbed out. So it's taken us a while to build up our own workforce to be able to reduce the number of external contractors. And we've now moved from 30% internal, 70% external to the opposite, 70% internal, 30% external, and we want to move further. There are some cases where the work is of such a specialist nature, we don't keep our own people on the books because we don't have enough work for them to work, the 52 weeks of the year. So we do contract out certain specialist works, maybe things like asbestos removal, things of that nature where it's necessary. But our aim is to move on and have as much work as we can practically do in-house without having people sitting idle for obvious reasons. Contractors are helpful when you have spikes in demand. We never quite know how many void properties we're going to have. It can go up if you get 2 or 3, bunch of terminations. What we try to do there is, if we haven't got a massive load of day-to-day repairs, we can move those crews across, and that cuts the other way. If the voids go down, the void crews can work across on day-to-day repairs. But it is definitely going in the right direction. This survey was conducted over well over a year ago, and we were still in that throes, but we are definitely increasing our in-house workforce. Yes, you've got to manage people more, but it's a lot easier for me to deal with my team. If we have issues, we can just talk to the people. We don't get into contractual negotiations. We can make things better. We have greater flexibility, as I've just said. Oh, there's not much voids going on. Right, lads, get out and do these day-to-day repairs. That works really well. Long term, the ambition is that for small new build schemes, 4 houses, people of a certain age like me will remember when councils actually built houses themselves, and I'd like to do that at some point again. It develops skills of the workforce. It makes their job more interesting, and I'm a great believer, if you build something and you've got to maintain it, you'll do a good job. And that's a really important thing. That's why we're going to move kitchens and bathrooms gradually in-house as well. Because if you've got to go out and maintain that, you'll do a good job. It takes time. We've got to build up the skills. What I don't want to do is rush the recruitment, and we have too many people. Never, ever want to make redundancies and build it up. And as I think has been mentioned around the table, skills are, we really do face a massive shortage of skills, not just in Powys. Powys, it's probably exacerbated because of our rurality. But then again, conversely, in Cardiff, there will have a lot more demand. We need to build those skills up. But Council definitely in-house. I feel, yes, there are challenges. We have to keep an eye on the costs, which we do. And, we are hoping that the HRA will end in balance this year, which it didn't do last year. So lots of work there. That has been positive. But yeah, we will. And we're tightening up the management of those contractors that we do use as well. Because the quality of the work they do, it may be a contractor, but the contractual relationship we have is the council with the tenant, and we are responsible for what people do in our homes. So, for example, the ORP retrofit work we're doing as part of Net Zero, that had been entirely outsourced. We've now brought the management of that back in-house. We don't yet have the skill set to install that equipment because it is still an entirely new field. To put this stuff up. Eventually we will, but by at least managing it now, we will have that all, in hand and be able to do that, because that's a new area of work. But again, I don't want us to be in the position that we make all the mistakes that others can. I've always joked, Birmingham's got 60,000 properties. They can make the odd error. I've put it right. We've got 5,500. We can't make any errors.
Thank you. Councillor Rafe, you okay with the responses?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I very much appreciate the challenge that you've got, Andy. So that's great to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Liz.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andy. I'm Matthew. I was really impressed with the report. Statistically, it looks very good, and it's statistically significant, and everything's more or less going in the right direction. The other observation I just wanted to make is the vision that I've seen this morning from you, Andy, and from Matthew, that there's a real commitment to build homes, to maintain homes, and to make sure that people have got a really good standard of social housing, and that you're engaged with people, and I think, that's absolutely fantastic. And you have a sense, I think, and I'm sure everybody sitting here does have that sense that we've got some confidence in the way things are going. I got one question about communication, and I know it does feature in the report that it needs to improve. But I also note in other reports from across the authority, communication regularly comes up. It comes up with social services, it comes up with adult and children's services, it comes up with highways. And I just wondered what work you do across departments to try to improve, communication more generally, and whether you've got any observations, points to bring back on that.
Well, we're now in with Matt with one directorate, which is really good. So we're already doing a lot of work, for example, on economic development, working together with them. So I've got a meeting with colleagues there. We have a regular monthly meeting. That's around, for example, can we turn redundant shops and buildings in town centres into homes? So it should also add to that. So we are building those links across. In terms of communication with the public, I think it is a wider council thing. Often I live in Ceredigion and I don't recall the last time anybody came to speak to me from the council, but I do have views. So I think it's the way we allow people to get in touch with us. And that's why we've introduced with housing the Tell Us, where we've got a Tenant 100 panel, those sort of things. Not everybody wants to go to a meeting. Some people just want to say something in 2 minutes, and we need to be in a position to accept that and acknowledge that, bit like market research. So I think Councillor Dorrance is, and Matt as well, because they have a bigger remit than I. So if you don't mind, can I defer to them? I think they might be better placed to answer this because they have a much wider remit and seniority to me.
Yeah, we'll bring Matt in. He's got his hand up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Councillor Liz's point, and just to say the housing service, I've taken it over the last 6 months, and just to say to everybody, it is one of those services that goes out there, as you said, meets with the public probably more than some other services, and generally what we're finding is that they are the sort of the ambassadors essentially for Powys County Council. And if people got issues, it may not just be housing, it could be highways related, it could be to do with grounds maintenance. So certainly bringing HTR and housing together along with planning and economic development is certainly going to be a positive way forward in terms of out there engaging with the public. And just I've got the floor, Chair, just to say that it is encouraging to see the results, and certainly since it's coming from Alps, they are improving year on year, and I'm confident when we do the survey in 2025, the results will improve again. So just to say thanks to Andy and the team for the work that they're doing. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thank you very much. Okay, not seeing any more hands on this one. I'll perhaps just take a little bit of Chair's prerogative to sort of follow up on a few points. I think, yeah, generally seeing that positive upward trend, which is really important for us, but absolutely taking the point from Councillor Graham there that we've still got some areas to work on, and let's see what we can do to improve some of the communities where we're still not getting the best of responses. I think in general, from my point of view, several things I really liked about it. I mean, obviously we're using external consultants to do the survey, but the quality of the report that's come back from that work to me is really good. It's a very clear, easy to read report. It's got that good mix of infographics. It's got the devil in the detail, and you can find the bits in it relatively straightforward. And I'm completely dyslexic, so if I can get through it, it works well, and we can then think that it works well for the majority of us. And what I do like is clearly the responses have been gone and got, if you like. So they are ringing around tenants, and tenants are willing to engage in what is probably a fairly lengthy survey, I would assume, because there's a lot of questions in there and there's a lot of answers. So yeah, I'm just sort of clocking that approach definitely works within this department, and maybe something we can learn across the authority, where our responses to some of our surveys are woeful, as we know. But this has taken time and cost to literally ring around people and spend time doing it, and we've put that into the hands of a professional company doing it, and the results are clear to see. So I'm very grateful. It's nice to have a positive in the main report with us as well, which is really good. And we understand that this was a year or so ago, another year or so before we see the next one, and may those statistics continue to improve and have the ability to look at the devil in the detail, because what we did talk about as well previously was you don't only just ask, are you dissatisfied? You go that next step and that third step on, well, why are you dissatisfied and in which particular areas? So that does give us meaningful data that we can then interpret and hopefully improve on. So yeah, generally well done all. That's very helpful. Obviously those officers that are just connected to this one, if you want to disappear whilst we move on, you're more than welcome, but equally it's an area of the authority that tracks across all of our remit, so please do feel free to hang on as well. So we're moving on to the roadmap for net zero, and we've got Daniel with us here in the room and Diane from the team, and I believe we're going to ask Tom to join us. Rachel, is that correct?
I'll just ask him to join now, Chair.
Thank you. Whilst they're doing that, perhaps Daniel, if you want to, or if Diane, I can see you put your camera on, if either of you want to sort of give us a preamble before Tom joins us, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. Oh, sorry, or Jackie, if you wanted to come in. It's clearly your portfolio too.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did just want to say a few words first while Dan's getting himself sorted out there as well. So we've had many calls across the authority to have some kind of map going towards net zero, and it's taken us quite a long time to get to this point, but I feel we've now got to that point, and I'm very pleased to see that we can actually move forward on that. So over the last 2 years, we have been building the right culture here in Powys as well. So it's not just about doing something, it's actually about changing the culture within the whole organisation so we can actually move towards net zero. That's been quite a task, but I feel very confident now that we have set the right tone in the change of culture, so moving things forward towards that target. There has been a climate and nature member steering group set up. That was part of the motion that we had, and a stakeholder group. That's now beginning to work really well. And they've also asked for calls to have this route map, and they will be looking at this, interrogating it as we go forward, monitoring it and evaluating it as we start making some of those changes. So the route map will be explained by Dan. He's got a really interesting little presentation, which I think is a good way forward for us to understand this, because not everybody does actually see route maps as something that they engage with, but I think the presentation does do that. You've also got some work that's been done here for you as a scrutiny committee, sort of explaining that in the scrutiny paper. So I hope you've all had a chance to read that. And I'd be really, really keen to see what questions you have, what observations you have, so that it can help us with the work as we move forward. This is a big, big area. And as you say, Chair, it does reach across all of our services. So thank you for that indulgence there for a few minutes. Thank you.
No, thanks, Councillor Jackie. And Daniel, would you like to come in prior to sort of Tom presenting?
Yes, of course. No, thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Jackie, Councillor Jackie, for your kind words as well. I should obviously say, in terms of the route map, the next element of this will be the deep dives, which we're undertaking, where we've identified some key themes. So there is, in the next 2 months, there'll be a number of dates set for members to attend where appropriate and actually discuss measures to implement elements of this roadmap and secure tangible outputs for us, really, to look at what we can do to address this and actually look at what's in our gift to influence. So that'll be using both internal and external partners to support us with that. So I think, Tom, if I could invite you in to actually present the slides, please, on the roadmap, that would be great.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Tom, yeah, I believe you're sharing a presentation, aren't you, with this one?
Yes. Hopefully be able to do that for you now. Please let me know when you can see the slides.
Yeah, that's just come through. Thank you.
Okay. So
Tom, just to say, I'm sure it's fine, but we can see it in sort of presenter mode, or I can. Not sure if I see it slightly different from others.
Okay. Right. How do I do this then? Sorry, bear with me. Not used to Zoom, unfortunately, so
no, don't worry. Yeah, my limited technology skills would say just present it in slideshow mode and it should work, but the other option is that far bottom right little open box thing sometimes puts it in the right frame.
Right.
There we go. That's great.
Okay. So As Jackie and Dan have outlined, this is focused on net zero roadmap for the council, and the accompanying paper went into a bit more detail, although it is a high level kind of framework at the moment in time, and apologies that it is quite technical. It's the inner workings of mine and one or two colleagues' minds that we, as we move towards the development of the document, will frame it in a way that is understandable to a wide range of audience members with different levels of detail. But basically, the purpose of the scrutiny session is it's quite early in the day in the development of the document, but we wanted to give you an opportunity to consider the proposed outline for the roadmap, help shape that work, support and make proposals about changes that we could make to the document, and also to provide feedback if you think there's anything that we need to add, amend, or is missing from the document. So really keen to get your views today. I wanted to give a brief high-level overview of the journey thus far, and there's lots more work that's happened. These are kind of some of the high-level kind of actions that the council has taken on this climate and nature emergency journey. So in September 2020, the council declared a climate emergency at full council, and in 2021 a climate action board was created. That board supported the development of the climate strategy, which is visible on and accessible on our corporate website. And in 2022, in October, the Nature and Biodiversity Emergency was declared at full council, and the same year, the Nature Recovery Action Plan was developed in partnership with the Paris Nature Partnership, which is a broader external group of stakeholders across Paris. In March 2023, the Climate and Nature kind of initiative, I think, was more established as part of the transformation portfolio, and a climate nature program was established with a defined board that brought together senior officers from across the organization. I started around March, April in my role, so the council was pushing more focus and emphasis on delivery against our climate and nature emergency declarations. We commissioned a Netherwood climate review. So Alan Netherwood came in and undertook a assessment of the council's delivery against our climate and nature emergencies, and set out a number of priorities and recommendations for us to deliver in a more established way. That concluded in December of 2023 and was signed off or agreed by Cabinet and CLT, I believe, in February of 2024. We, on the territorial perspective, Paris officers worked with a range of stakeholders across Paris, Ceredigion, and Mid Wales, and also governments and wider stakeholders in the development of a Paris local area energy plan, which looked at the grid and the energy across domestic, commercial, heat, power and transport, and how we decarbonise towards net zero. In May, we undertook a number of workshops with the different areas within the climate nature programme to realign the action plan to the Netherwood Commission, and we undertook a governance review in August of this year, post Netherwood Commission. Looking forward, the next two key bits of work, as Dan mentioned, and Jackie, the 4 deep dive sessions, which we'll hold over December, which will help shape some of the narrative and the detail of, you know, where we can focus our action against the roadmap, and the roadmap that we're looking to develop over December, January, February, and hopefully those two elements will come together, which will then enable us to have a clearer view on where we need to go, how we get there. In terms of what is a net zero roadmap, the net zero roadmap sets out as an organisation what our journey to net zero emissions looks like. So it takes from where we are today, our baseline, and where we need to be in the future, so our target 2030. It indicates the steps and milestones necessary for the council to achieve net zero green gas emissions, and it will provide an indication of the pace and scale we need to decarbonise our assets and operations, the targets we need to set corporately, but also potentially at service level, and give a real clear indication of what we need to do, where we need to do it, at what time. In terms of elements that will be included in the roadmap, it's a great opportunity to refresh the climate strategy that was developed in 2021, bring that up to date with existing policy, strategy and ambitions at national, regional, local levels. It also enables us to redefine or outline the purpose and vision for the council. What's our drivers? What's our policies? What new policies need to be put in place? What commitments are we making, and what are the principles and aims that underpin all the work that we are doing and need to continue doing? It's also a great opportunity, I think, for a learning piece as well around climate change theory, evidence base, risks and consequences. The roadmap element of the document gets into the nitty-gritty, so it shows us a high-level scenario of how we deliver net zero trajectory. So in individual areas like buildings, we might set a target to cut emissions by 80% by 2030. And then we'd look at how we do that through energy efficiency measures, energy management and generation, heat decarbonisation. Transport, for example, could be 50% by 2030. And we do that by electrifying the fleet in certain areas, looking at route optimization. Potentially, do we need to have the same amount of vehicles? Can we rationalize them? And supply chain, which we know is the highest area, but the hardest to decarbonize. And a lot of local authorities simply aren't looking at this until 2050. But we are keen to look at how we can influence contracts to embed sustainability when we are procuring goods and services as a council to see a reduction in that figure by 2030. So those targets are shared purely as examples, but I think it gives a bit of a clearer view of the meat of the work, really. The action plan I've highlighted in orange, and that's because the roadmap will not give a full picture of what the actual action plan is, because we have those deep dive sessions and the conversations that will ensue afterwards, after the roadmap has been developed, that will further define that action plan. We won't have all the costed detail within the roadmap. That's still being developed by the individual work streams. But the action plan element should, at a future state, provide a detailed costed plan for how the roadmap will be implemented. The ambitions will be broken down into tasks. We'll have carbon reduction calculations and carbon removal and sequestration calculations. So what we can't remove, how do we offset it? How do we look at things like renewable energy generation or habitat creation, restoration? Project level costings, and then the output. So what are the co-benefits? What are we going to deliver beyond just carbon removal, reduction of energy bills, for example, or health economic benefits? But it will also identify, hopefully, potential funding routes. So how can we fund the elements that we know we need to do and we've identified in the roadmap through our own funding and external funding? The trajectories and pathway elements looks at the intended and planned overall reduction in carbon emissions between now and 2030. And what we'll do is look at a number of different trajectories and pathways to get there. So there'll be a constant, so the status quo pathway. So if we continue on the current trajectory, just doing as we're doing, business as usual, what does that look like? And that won't get us anywhere near net zero. An absolute net zero line, so an unrealistic position, because I think being absolutely net zero by 2030 before any local authority is going to be extremely difficult within the financial constraints, let alone the wider resource and capacity and expertise abilities to deliver. But that gives us an absolute position. That's if we want to be net zero, what that would look like. And then we'll look at 2 or 3 pathways of varying pace and scale of delivery, anywhere between 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80% emissions reductions, which gives a menu essentially that we can look at as members and as officers and say, this is where we're comfortable, this is where we think we can deliver, and this is the preferred pathway. Each trajectory and pathway will have targets for reduction and removal, both corporately and, where possible, we'll drill down to service directorate level, but that will be dependent on data availability, I think. So one that we'll get into as a team and see what's possible. To understand why we're developing a roadmap, so the council currently has no overarching plan in terms of targets and a way of measuring delivery against net zero. So we have action plans, we have an overarching strategy, we have a program, but the roadmap will really then take that and define in and set targets for individual areas and collectively how to get there. A lot of excellent work is being undertaken and has been undertaken, but without the roadmap, we can't be sure decisions we make are the best use of funding, resources, and the outcomes that we're delivering are as good as something else we could be doing. It will identify areas of high carbon, which will enable us to better prioritise and align our resources for delivery in the areas that we can make the most progress and affect wider positive change. So the Netherwood Commission was all around prioritisation, identifying how we utilise resource in the most effective way, and hopefully this document moves us forward in that way. And it also enables us to assess our priorities, define our targets, and provide clarity on our ability to meet our targets. In terms of a methodology, we've put a methodology in the framework document. And this is almost a step process that we will use to develop this roadmap and beyond. So establishing a baseline year, that will be the year that we pick from the carbon accounts that we say this is the start of the process. And that's likely to be this year, as we've had 4 or 5 years of carbon accounting now, we can define a trend up to this date. We'll set the boundary, so what's in and out of scope of the roadmap, what's in and out of scope of emissions reduction targets. So we'll undertake that assessment and agree that with members and senior officers. We'll set a target period, which ultimately is going to be 2030 net zero, but individual areas within the roadmap might have earlier targets depending on their ability to move faster and quicker, and other areas' ability to move slower. We'll then develop an emissions inventory and calculate the current emissions and targets. So that will be the meat of the work. So that's the bit where we're looking at the carbon accounts, drilling down, where's the high areas of carbon? What does that mean? What can we do to deliver reductions in that area? And I think those areas are within the roadmap development. As we move on to these ones, we start moving into the deep dive and the conversations that will ensue after we've developed the roadmap. So identifying emission reduction measures, developing emission reduction measures, and then the delivering monitoring and evaluation. So those will be deep dives, that will be action plans, and then that will be delivery. I think this is my last slide. I did some self-reflection. So coming to scrutiny committee is always good because you self-assess as much as you scrutinise us and provide us with valuable insight. So areas that are missing from my framework document are finances. So we need to have an idea of indicative costs, where funding's available, where there's gaps, and consideration of how we fund delivery. And we might not have all the answers in the roadmap, but I think we need to outline that as best we can at this moment in time. And also the risks. We need to do a risk assessment, identifying which risks will stop us from delivering our roadmap. And these could be things like risk to reputation, financial risk, risk of inaction, risk of the fact that we potentially don't have the resources. Thank you very much for listening. I'll stop now and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Tom. It's a helpful sort of presentation to lead into the discussion, and obviously we've had the paper with us before as well. I think from my point of view as chair, just sort of pointing out this is an early engagement on a pretty strategic document for the authority. We talked about that. I think we as Scrutiny are pleased it's coming to us early and we get the chance to engage, but arguably we just that little bit, we're not here to necessarily scrutinise the roadmap yet because it's not there, but to help shape and inform the journey that it's going to go on across the whole authority. So we absolutely welcome it, but yeah, just understanding that we're not scrutinising anything that's anywhere near final yet, and we understand through your presentation and through the introduction from Daniel that there's motions in place already to get us from where we currently are and where we've been over the last year or two to where we need to get to within setting those targets that we've got ahead of us. So yeah, very grateful for that, and I'll open up to the floor for questions. I've got a couple of my own, but I'm going to leave mine till last and hopefully they'll get covered. Councillor Corrida.
I was just going to say communication is the key, and you need to talk to people like me, town and community councils, and I'm very grateful for the presentation, the clear presentation you just given. I spent an hour or so précising your initial statement into an easy read version. I feel much happier now. So you gave a link to the Cornish Power BI display, so sort of dashboard way of illustrating the progress made in emissions reductions. But instantly I was bamboozled because the metrics weren't clearly explained. They talked about locations-based emissions or markets-based emissions, and explaining how we evaluate very clearly, I think is crucial. I don't know if I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, I think I like the Cornish dashboard in terms of articulating and showing, as you said, that how we're making progress both locally as an organisation and territorially as a county. And I would like to replicate that, but yeah, the market and the local split, I think we would try and design it in a way and develop it in a way, if that's the direction we wanted to go, in a way that is understandable, is clear, is communicatable, because even I looked at that and I had to look at it in more detail, find if I'm having to do that, then if it's something like was finally to go on the public website, then it would need to be understandable by all. So I think that's a really good point.
Thank you. I can see you're nodding, Corinna, and I'm sure we'd all welcome as plain as simple as we can make it, and leave the devil in the detail there for those that have that ability or the energy to go and find it and read into it. Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I say a big thank you to Daniel and Tom and commend all the officers that have taken part in getting us to where we are now. I joined in 2001 developing the power strategy, and part of the risk, I think, is that we and I think this was brought up in one of our meetings, we need to more members to engage with the net zero road, and I'm not sure how many councillors are on that committee at the moment. I know there's 68 councillors, but how many have we got actually appointed on the net zero climate strategy? And the second part of my question is really the central government emissions. I get a little bit sort of lost when I hear that the emissions are worse than fossil fuel burning, and what are we doing with our waste, and are we following it all the way through? I know we're doing really well in Powys for waste and recycling, but is there the following through to where that is ending up? So there are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether Daniel or Tom, either of you want to try and come in and answer either of those.
Yeah, I certainly cover the second point. Tom, sorry, I'm not exactly sure how many councillors are actually involved in the steering group. Would you be able to answer that?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I think it's around 17 to 20 members.
I was going to say 16, I think, was where I was on that one. But so in terms of the waste strategy, one of the deep dives will actually be around what more can we do to utilise everything from verge cuttings to manure off farms, etc. So it's going to be one of the deep dives. And actually, only this morning we were in conversation with Harper Adams, and they've got some experts there around carbon reductions around the waste industry. So yeah, we'll be looking to get those external people into those deep dives to offer us some alternative views and some potential solutions. So Matt, I think were you coming in as well? Sorry.
Yeah, if it's all right, Chair, it was just to mention in terms of Councillor Peter's points around where are we confident where the end destinations are of our recycling. That is key legislation that is monitored very, very robustly by NRW. So all our materials, and we can give you a list of that. So off the top of my head, I don't know exactly where they go here, but I can speak to the team, and for example, if you picked on plastics, we'll know from where we collect it to where it actually ends up then. So all that information is there to hand.
Yeah, thank you. I think Peter's point was partly around sort of just making sure that we're clocking the unintended consequences of the direction that we're travelling in, and making sure we've sort of fully understand that entire journey of everything. And we know there's an awful lot in that work, isn't there? And as Peter said, absolutely congratulations to all of the team to getting your heads around it and understanding it and presenting it so that we can start to understand it. But obviously we all hear new snippets coming out left, right and centre, don't we, about challenges on both sides of it. And I think from our point of view, it's about us just being very confident and very clear that no, we've got the best strategy because that's what the data and the science is telling us. That might change. That always happens, doesn't it, as we learn more and we evolve. But we have to have confidence that when we've set a direction, it's the best possible direction we think we can possibly get in. So thank you. I think that's definitely taken the point. Councillor Rafe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks, Tom, for your presentation. I think this is a good step forward. I would just like to note that we are behind compared to other councils in doing this. We declared a climate emergency 5 years ago. And we're only now really establishing the policy around how we're going to get to net zero 5 years later. So I think that must be said, but that does give us an opportunity to engage with other councils on this, because a number of them did this quite a few years ago, and so they will know what's worked for them, what's been able to assist them in delivering net zero and decarbonisation. And so I would just, obviously I'm sure you're going to do this anyway, but speak to as many local authorities as you can, to see what results they've been able to get from theirs, what hasn't helped and what has. And the only other point I'd make, having been involved in some of this myself, for other authorities, it's really important that this piece of work, when the roadmap's completed, it leads on to other things. So it's not just, oh well, we've completed the roadmap, it's going to now deliver net zero and decarbonisation, because it won't. There's and I'm slightly concerned on page 98, although I appreciate this is very much an outline document, where I think the chief executive's comment, and apologies if this isn't actually what it will say, but these actions are subject to funding and resources. Now, that's not going to be good enough as far as a roadmap goes, because that's not enough to make sure that it's achievable, because that relies on other things becoming available as and when to make these things happen. But as we all know, achieving decarbonisation, especially of our larger buildings, is going to require huge amounts of capital investment. And so we have to get as close as possible to say where that's going to come from, and ultimately come to the conclusion as part of this exercise as to whether what we're trying to do is achievable or not by the date we've set. And so I would just suggest that, whilst this whilst this has to outline what needs to be done to reach our goal, we also need to be very realistic in establishing, okay, we know what we've got to do, but are we able to do what we know we've got to do by this date? And if not, then ultimately the roadmap needs to establish that. I've just seen it in the past where documents like this have been created and it says that we're going to do all of this, but then actually a few years later people look back and they say, well, actually we haven't hit that milestone, and I'm aware that a number of councils who have further along their journey on this than we are, are not going to hit their target. So I think this needs to be used as an opportunity to confirm the achievability of our ambitions, in addition to establishing what we need to do to get there. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Rafe. I think, yeah, it's a few questions in there, isn't there? But some of it is around just how are we looking over our shoulders to other authorities for support, whether they're ahead of the game or perhaps sharing our learning for those that aren't there. We know we often receive positive comments around some of our areas of work, don't we, in terms of digital ambitions and stuff and how we're getting there, and other authorities are using that as their driving force. So we can definitely could and should be doing the same, absolutely. And like you say, that I think Tom sort of did hint to it in his presentation, that obviously this report to us here and now doesn't have the devil in the detail of the finance, but we do know financing net zero is going to be a consistent and a very real challenge across the whole authority, isn't it? And there's always going to be a balancing act, but ultimately we can't ignore it, and almost we can't not do it. So it's about how do we do it within the means that we've got, and how do we get the furthest we can. But like I say, not setting a strategy that is unachievable, that's just pointless, just doesn't work, does it? We just give up with it and we lose patience with it. And an assumption from me, just sitting in the chair's role today, is I would argue and I would hope that almost every scrutiny committee will be looking at, once we've set those performance targets and those indicators, like we do with many other things, we'll keep looking at them and we'll keep challenging them, and we'll keep celebrating the wins, but we'll keep pushing where we're not doing so well. And that has to be every scrutiny committee's role going forward. And like you said, Peter, we have to work out how we engage the majority of the councillors behind this, because this is an authority plan. It's all the staff, it's everyone has to be embedded in this, don't they? Sorry, I've taken a bit of chair's prerogative there and waffle, but Tom, don't know if you wanted to come back in, or Daniel, on any of those sort of sharing best practice with other authorities or anything.
I didn't know if Jackie might want to come in, and Diane would come in first, and then I'll speak if required.
Yeah, absolutely. Jackie, let's take you first.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to just say to Councillor Rafe about benchmarking against other authorities. I think that's, it's a really important thing to do, but we do have to be careful, because different authorities they've got different priorities, and it's not always easy to benchmark against those different priorities. But of course, we do look at what other authorities are doing across the UK, not just in Wales, but across the UK, and looking at different projects that they're doing to see whether we can learn from those, where we can establish something similar, whether they can learn from us as well. So there's lots of different elements that you have to consider when you're benchmarking, but I totally agree. We do need to sort of measure what we're doing against other authorities, but we do need to be careful that we're doing it correctly. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Jackie. Diane?
Yeah, I just wanted to really challenge the comment by Councillor Rafe there about, we haven't made any progress since we published our strategy, which is a little bit disappointing, because the number of news stories that have been going out within the past month over the difference we have made in terms of our activity against climate is has been phenomenal, and we've continued to publish the difference we've made. But I fully take on board that actually the position where we are now and where we need to be needs to be much better structured, and we need to understand all of the different elements to get there, and benchmarking plays a role in that. We have done a very headline benchmarking exercise against other Welsh authorities, but obviously there's much to learn from across the UK and across the world on different aspects that we can achieve. But across other Welsh local authorities, in some instances, we're at the top and lead, not the very top, but in the top quartile and helping to lead the way. And in other aspects, we're in the lower quartile and lots to do. And don't forget as well that we have under the Public Service Board a joint approach to our response to climate emergency with other public service members as well. So with Brecon Beacons National Park, Banai Brycheiniog National Park leading the way, but with us sat around that table as well, taking part in kind of like that wider aspect of how we can actually look at the climate challenge across the whole of Powys, not just Powys County Council, which is some of where the measurement from Welsh Government focuses on, but actually our challenge is much wider as well. So I think this document tries to set that framework in that wider picture, whereas sometimes we do look at it a bit interested about where we are as a council. And of course, it's not just us that needs to react, or even just public sectors. It's the whole wider framework. So I just wanted to point out that just to reiterate, we have made great strides. We have made great differences. We've been doing lots on our council buildings, our transport infrastructure, all sorts. And the UK Share Prosperity Fund has made huge investment in community areas of decarbonisation and supporting the discussions and the understanding across Powys. So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavour, but more than welcome to come back to Scrutiny with maybe a look at what's actually happened and the difference we've made so far. We've still got a massive journey ahead of us, fully acknowledge.
Yeah, I suppose the thing I take from that discussion, and I think it's fair to have the question and to receive the sort of challenge back, is perhaps unless you've been detailedly involved in that, we might not have just picked up on all of that work that has been going on. And I know the steering group and the working group sort of mirror each other, but there's loads of information flowing around there, and I certainly can't remember an awful lot of what's in there. We try and look at the press and the news statements and things like that, but we do see so many, we perhaps don't get a chance to see them all. And I guess in sort of Tom's defence, bringing this to us, this is about the roadmap going forward, but what we perhaps should have done was just put in a page or two within the report almost, and says, look, this is the journey we've made over the last 3 or 4 years since declaring that emergency. Here's the good wins, go and look at them in more detail. I don't think, personally, and that is personally, we need to look too far back in a separate session, but maybe others might think differently. But I think it's all there. We just haven't necessarily seen it in an easy to find location as part of this paper. So thank you for that. But Rafe, do you want to come back in and follow that up?
Yeah, I will come back in briefly, and thanks, Diane. I think the point I was trying to make was that we haven't made the kind of progress that other local authorities have done in the same time frame. And I absolutely take on board your point with regards to the progress made. Although in theory that progress should have been made following the creation of this roadmap, so that we could then go tick off. We've highlighted what we needed to do, or what we need to do. We've then done that. We're going to tick off. So my vision of this, the way I see it, is that we're now going to create a roadmap, which is probably going to show some of the things that we've already done as needed to achieve our target. And so we might be retrospectively ticking those things off that we've done them, in the few years prior. So I think possibly this roadmap is going to make our approach much more coordinated. And whilst the progress made to date may have just been using the opportunities that we've been able to secure, rather than looking at decarbonisation on the whole. And so I think this will be a good step forward. But the roadmap, certainly in my opinion, should have been there in the first place, so that we knew exactly what we needed to do.
No, I think we fully understand that, Rafe. But I guess we started from almost a zero baseline on this a few years ago, and we're getting there as an authority. But absolutely take your point that the quicker we get on and define that, the quicker we can start working more towards it. What we've been doing is gathering the evidence and the background information, isn't it, for a year or two, and that feels a bit slow. But point well made, I think. I don't know, Tom, if you want to come in at all on that point before I take some more questions.
I'd probably just focus on the element around engaging with other local authorities. So my team are already engaging. We've had a number of conversations with local authorities in Wales, England and Scotland to understand best practice, understand where they've been successful, where they failed, what potentially could be replicable in our context. So we plan to do that more moving forward, not just for the roadmap, just generally broadly across delivery, and to bring that back to program board, steering group, and yeah, just a bit of confidence there that we are doing that, and we aim to do that moving forward.
Great, thanks, Tom. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to make the point also that we do facilitate training across the organisation for both employees and councillors as well. So I think as an action, we'll ensure that those training dates are shared appropriately, and everyone actually has a chance to spend some time looking at some of the figures, how we got to where we are, and what we can do to improve performance. So we'll get those shared as well.
Great, thank you. I'm going to just pick up a few things. Diane, you mentioned it, which is great as a lead in. Very aware that obviously the PSB has been taking a key lead on some of our fact finding, if you like. Where are we? What are others doing across Wales, UK, and the world? And presented arguably a pretty strong picture of what we need to do and how and when and why. I'm aware that they're about to start doing some, I believe, fairly small sort of short feasibility studies in some of the key areas that we're about to do our deep dives in. And I always have that concern of, gosh, are we duplicating? How do we carry that on? Well, I was told that they're about to start looking at buildings and retrofitting, agriculture, transport, food and drink, and partnership and government. So 5 quite big key themes. And my understanding is their money is not going to last for very long to do that. So they're going to be doing that very quickly whilst we're at the same time starting some of our deep dives. So I just wanted some assurances that we're sat across those, or we're influencing them coming forward, or they're going to come and join our deep dives, because yeah, it'd be bonkers to duplicate that sort of work. Daniel?
Yeah, just to confirm, they will be invited to our deep dives, so that there'll be information shared accordingly.
Great, thank you. That's a good answer. Also aware that the climate officer, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a Powys-based climate officer's role, is currently funded out of shared prosperity funding, which finishes end of December. Have we got a plan to try and
it's actually
extend that?
transformation funding.
Okay, sorry.
For the climate post and ends in February. So discussions are underway currently in terms of hopefully securing that post long term. I see Diane's got a hand up as well.
Yeah, Diane, you come in, please.
I think you might have been referring, Councillor Gary, to the climate officer that's funded under Share Prosperity that sits under the National Park.
Right, is it under the National Park or the PSB? I wasn't.
Well, it's work on behalf of the PSB, but they're managed by the National Park.
Okay, so we have 2 climate officers covering Powys, because my understanding the PSB one isn't for the National Park, it's for the whole of Powys.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, but is Daniel referring then to another officer that's funded out of transformation funding somewhere else? Sorry, Daniel, you're on mute.
Sorry, yes, I was referring to one in our team who's currently dedicated to the deep dive sessions.
Okay, sorry. Okay, yeah. So we've got some staff in post at the moment, but I guess what we're clocking and understanding is there's a risk continuing that work beyond the end of this year and beyond March, and you will work very hard, I'm sure, to put that in place, because clearly there's going to be an awful lot of work that needs officer time and support to carry on with these. Thank you. That was one of my points. The other one, obviously, we know that there's been some reasonably detailed deep dives already by Welsh Government and reports now published. I would assume that officers are trying to have the time to take on board some of those findings, although I do understand from the wider, let's say, public bodies, there are some concerns in the reports that Welsh Government have now produced, which obviously worries us a bit, but clearly they were trying to set a bit of strategic direction in those. So it was just, I know they're quite detailed. I haven't had a chance to go through them all yet, and I'm sure we haven't, but they have published their whatever they called their deep dives, their net zero challenge group findings. So just wanted to make sure Tom can see you nodding your head. That means you've seen them. That means you're able to digest them. Councillor Jackie, I'm sure you have too, and they're out there. But I think we need to learn from what others are saying around them, because I am seeing challenge on them now, which is interesting, and those can come through some of those deep dive sessions, I'm sure. yeah, don't necessarily need an answer on that one. I think that was just more of a statement. And then the last one for me was, I was interested, Daniel, waste. I think there was a challenge from us in our pre-discussions around, well, is waste going to be something that is going to be effectively looked at through a deep dive or not? We're going to struggle to put it in. We know that there's a lot of topics that the climate steering group and nature recovery group and steering group and the other one, we can't do everything in very short spaces of time, and there was already a long list, isn't there? And we probably need to prioritize. But I think from our previous discussions in this group, waste seemed to be an important one, and what I took from your answer was that we think waste is going to be able to be one of those deep dives in some shape or form. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Great, thank you very much. Jackie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just briefly, there is a strategy paper on its way through. I'm not sure what the date of is. It will be coming to scrutiny, but it will certainly be on its way to scrutiny. But it's a very comprehensive strategy. It's quite a high level strategy on, we're calling it a resource strategy rather than a waste strategy, but it's for the whole of Powys. But just to be aware that we work for with the blueprint. So we work with the Welsh Government blueprint. It's very key to the work that we've done. It's been very key to the impact that we've had here in Powys. But there's lots of elements in there where we be focusing directly on the circular economy, looking at repair and reuse and reduce as being our big headline R's rather than recycling, because recycling has with it its own challenges, which I think has been brought out here very eloquently by Councillor Peter already. But just to say that we are looking at that. That paper has been across all the different areas as well. So WRAP, which is the Welsh Government organisation which looks at waste, they have looked at this strategy and have given us feedback. We'll be looking for others to give us feedback on this strategy. We'll be going out for consultation as well. So there will be a lot of work around that. So it isn't just about the deep dives, it's about all those other areas as well. So I think by the time it gets through, this will have been seen and been digested by a very large number of different people and different organisations. Quite excited about it as well, actually.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, lots of interesting ground to cover across this work. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. Does anyone want to come in with any last points or comments for Tom and the team to take on board? I think we've covered quite a bit in there. We know it's an early journey. We know we need to get on with it. Let's start getting to the point of where we can clearly make more inroads into our journey, be comfortable with the figures that we're setting ourselves, and work out how we do understand the challenges around the financing of it in one place. But Councillor Peter.
Thanks, Chair. I've just got a question really on renewables for houses that are having solar and installation done. I'm just interested that I've seen quite a lot in my ward being having that engagement and having it fulfilled, but noticing there's an awful lot of waste going into skips, and I'm wondering, is that being monitored for the amount of money that's being spent on the private housing stock?
Yeah, it's probably quite a detailed question, but I can see Diane's coming with a hand up, so let's see if Diane can answer that one.
Thank you very much.
I think you're referring to the EcoFlex scheme, which is a very complicated scheme in itself, which some we manage as a council and some is managed externally. And just as it happens, I have been reading a report on the scheme and how that scheme is managed, which will be making its way through the process and hopefully come here to scrutiny as well, so you can have a bit more understanding about that scheme. It didn't specifically pick up on the waste element, but maybe that's something you could ask at that when that comes through to scrutiny, kind of link it in at that point, if that's okay, Councillor Peter.
That would be super. And actually, I may try and contact you after this meeting privately, if that's okay.
Please do.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think it's a fair point, isn't it? None of us want to see waste, and let's evaluate it on such a big scheme like that. What I am aware of in terms of new developments, there's sort of processes and protocols and agreements put in place of how a new development would deal with its waste on site and how it's treated and separated and all of that sort of stuff, but hard to have that same sort of authority over retrofitting and people just going out there and doing it in the general public. But yeah, I'm sure as a whole scheme, the whole scheme will be evaluated under the Eco 4 outputs, and is it doing what it needed to do? Is it doing it most efficiently way it can, etc., etc. So look forward to seeing that report. Thank you very much for the question. Okay, I'm happy to move on if that's okay with officers and members. I do need to just scroll my screen back up, but I think we're at, Rachel might need to help me whilst I get there, but we're at forward work programme. Yeah, scrutiny work programme. So the current papers to be looked at are on the list there, but you can see that we've got a potential gap coming through for the end of November. And I believe, Rachel, there has been a call out to sort of say who would like to bring papers forward from departments, and also the scrutiny committee here are wondering over what they might ask for as well. But have you had any updates at all on what we might see in terms of the next meeting?
Sorry, Chair, we haven't had any updates just yet, but I'll keep you all informed.
No, okay, that's fine, and we can obviously potentially rejig things around if that one remains a quiet agenda, or I guess we can postpone it if we need to. That's fine. We don't have to hold a meeting for sake of a meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Any final questions before we move into the committee reflection stage of this morning? Okay, thank you. Thank you, officers. Much appreciated. Rachel, sorry, I'm slightly old hat on this one. Do we move to a closed session for the committee reflection?
We do. I'll just end the meeting for any public watching. Just bear with me.